Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om everyone. Today we shall be beginning the Bhagavad Gita class, Srimad Bhavagad Gita. Literally it means the song of the Lord. The song sung by Shri Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, giving the knowledge of life and living to Arjuna. There are many different Gitas like Rama Gita, Ashtavakra Gita, etc. So Bhagavad Gita is the knowledge of life and living given by Shri Krishna to Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita, song of the Lord. And as I said, it gives us the knowledge of life and living. This knowledge of life and living is essential for human beings. Animals, they are governed by law of heredity, whereas human beings are not just governed by heredity but also by law of adaptation. So we need to seek the knowledge, gain the knowledge, and then adapt. A human being is given the choice of action. Animals do not have the choice of action. Herbivorous animal will be vegetarian. Carnivorous animal, they kill and eat. They don't have a choice. Human beings, without understanding this, they fed the cows, they mixed certain meat products in the cow's fodder and they fed the cows. And then the cows developed certain disease called, and they named the disease as mad cow disease. It is not the fault of the animals, it is the fault of the human beings. So animals function governed by the law of heredity. They do not have the choice of action, whereas human beings have the choice of action. And when we say choice, every choice comes with a consequence. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, isn't it? So we have the freedom to choose, but having chosen, we will be bound by the consequence that we cannot escape. As an actor, we choose and do a certain action, and later in our life, when we reap the repercussion, then we say, I didn't want this, I don't want this. This entire universe is a beautiful cosmos. It is governed by cause and effect relationship. It is not a chaos. So this choice of action that we have makes us more we have to become more conscious to know and then act. It is extremely important to gain the knowledge as to what to choose, how to implement, when to implement, etc. Think and function. In fact, a human being is called as Manushya. Manushya comes from the root man. Man means mind, a thinking ability. So, a human being is one who can think and function. The animals are called as non-thinking beings, isn't it? They cannot think. They have a very rudimentary thinking capacity. They do not have the thinking capacity as much as the human beings do. We, through our thinking, have harnessed the time, space, and causation. We have brought about a lot of inventions and discoveries. This is not the case with the animals. So if you ask, an animal, where are you going? What's the purpose of life? There is no purpose of life. You ask a cow, where are you going? It doesn't reply. It doesn't have any purpose. If the cow sees little fodder on the other side of the road, it will just try to jump across the road and go and feed on that fodder, isn't it? Whereas a human being can think, what is my purpose? What is the purpose of my life? Where am I going? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to function? So, we therefore need to understand, we need to know, gain the knowledge, and then choose. Whether you choose wisely or you choose ignorantly, you will have to face the consequence. Ignorance is not an excuse. You cannot say, I didn't know this choice will bring about this result. For example, if you choose to smoke, then you will have to face the consequences later on. You can't say I was ignorant of the consequences. Ignorant of the consequences doesn't, help you to get out of the consequence. You will have to face the consequence. Therefore, human beings have this choice of action. We need to learn. So, what is the manual for life? And most of us, when we buy any product, it comes with a manual. But most of us, what do? We don't read the manual. We just straight away start operating the product. When we buy the car also, we don't read the manual. You buy the microwave or washing machine or whatever, it comes with a manual. But very often we don't read the manual. Similarly, what is the manual for our life? This is more important. This is essential. We have this physical body, we have this mind, we have this intellect. With this body, mind and intellect, we are contacting this world. So, should we not know how to contact? So, therefore, Bhagavad Gita is nothing but the manual of life and living. And Bhagavad Gita is in fact the essence of the Vedas and the Vedanta. Veda means knowledge. So, Veda gives us the knowledge of life and living. It teaches us the technique of living, how to live. That is Veda and Vedanta. The end portion of the Vedas are called Vedanta. Vedas, as I said, nothing but the source of knowledge. And there are 4 parts to every Veda: Mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad. Mantra, Brahmana and Aranyaka put together are called as Veda Purva Bhaga, the beginning portion of the Vedas. And the end portion of the Vedas, where the Upanishads are given, is called Vedanta. And what does the Upanishad talk about? The philosophy of life, the essence. So, the entire Vedas, the beginning portion of the Vedas, prepares the human being, and the human being thus prepared through the Vedas, they come to Vedanta, and through Vedanta, they go to the ultimate goal of life. So, Veda means knowledge, Anta means the end. The end portion of Vedas is called Vedanta or the Upanishad. And Bhagavad Gita is the essence of that Upanishad. There is an invocation to Bhagavad Gita written by Madhusudana Saraswati. He has given 9 shlokas. It's called as Dhyana shlokas. In one of the shlokas he says, Sarvopanishado Ghavo Dokta Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat. Sarva Upanishadaha Gavaha. All the Upanishads are the cows. And Shri Krishna is the cowherd boy, milking the essence. The milk is the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is the calf. In the presence of the calf, the cow gets inspired and gives the milk. Arjuna is the seeker, the disciple, who through series of questioning brings out the knowledge from the Upanishads through Shri Krishna, the cowherd boy. Right? So, Shri Krishna is the cowherd boy, the milker, who milks the Upanishad and gives us the milk, which is Bhagavad Gita. the nectarine philosophy. Now, though the philosophy is given by Shri Krishna to Arjuna, Swami Madhusudana Saraswati says it is enjoyed by who? The Sattvic people. Sudhir Bhoktaha, the people who are wise, they enjoy. So, even though the nectarine philosophy is given, we need to put in effort to draw the essence through our efforts, through reflection, through manana, and then benefit. And this is what he says. Next week, we will start studying the Dhyana shlokas, all the 9 shlokas one by one. So, I am not going to the details of it. So, just wanted to say that Bhagavad Gita is nothing but the essence of the Upanishads. And how does the Bhagavad Gita start? It starts with the word dharma. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kima kurvata sanjaya. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, is asking his charioteer Sanjaya, who got this power to see, sitting in the palace in Hastinapura, what is happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, which is few miles away. And Sanjaya got this boon, this power from sage Vyasa. And Dhritarashtra is blind, he cannot see. So therefore, he is so curious to know what is happening on the battlefield between his sons and his brother's sons, Pandu's sons, called Pandavas. His sons are called Kauravas, and Pandu's sons are called Pandavas. So Dhritarashtra is asking, what is happening between my sons and Pandu's children? Please tell me. So the first word in the Bhagavad Gita is what? Dharma. Dharma is how the Gita starts. So therefore, Gita is called as Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra. It teaches us dharma, the values. Dharma means values, righteous principles. Why these righteous principles are important? Because these righteous values and principles, the choices and its consequences, which are explained in the Vedas and in the Bhagavad Gita, they are extremely important, because when we make our choices, and our choices, what we seek as per Veda is 4: Artha, Kama, Dharma and Moksha. Artha means wealth. Kama means enjoyment. Dharma, the values, the righteous goals, peace. And Moksha, liberation. And majority of us, we seek Artha and Kama. Isn't it? Beyond that, we don't think. All we want is what? When I am living in this world, I must feel secure. I need security. So, I think the sense of security will come to me by gaining wealth. Isn't it? The material wealth as I gain, I believe that I will get the sense of security. Or by developing more contacts with more and more people, by being around the people or being surrounded by people, my well-wishers, I believe that I will get that security. Right? So, security we want. Generally, all of us are feeling insecure. So, to combat that insecurity, we want wealth. And with that wealth, we want to enjoy life. So, we want to procure wealth. And when we have to procure wealth, we will be using the body, the mind and intellect only. These are the 3 equipments we have. Every human being is what? A combination of the physical body, the mind and the intellect, enlivened by the Atma, the self or the pure consciousness. We will get into the details in the classes later on. But first, the basic is body, mind, intellect. So we will be meeting the world to procure wealth using the body, mind and intellect. So we need to know how to procure. The way in which we procure the wealth, it should not only give us wealth, but it should also give us peace. Right? So all these are taught in the Vedas. How you have to live this life. They call it as Vedokta, Shastrokta or Dharmokta. Leading life based on the dharmas, the values. See, when we say value, what is a value? A value is that which adds value to our life. Isn't it? A value is that which adds value to our life. So, the Vedas talk about that. Bhagavad Gita talks about that. And many times in life, we face situations where we do not know what to choose. And this, Vedas call it as Sadharana Dharma and Vishesha Dharma. And in fact, this was the situation in which Arjuna was also. He had to choose between waging the war to establish righteousness, which means he had to kill his great-grandfather Bhishma and his guru Dronacharya. They were relatively good people. So he was confused. He said, killing these people, especially good people, isn't that pap? Isn't that sin? So my dharma tells me that I should not kill them. But at the same time, in this context here, to establish dharma, though they may be independently good people, but they are on the side of the adharma, unrighteousness. So here, Vishesha Dharma comes into effect. Right? So he has to act per that, as per that Vishesha Dharma. So he must know that. So first we need to learn dharma and then seek artha and kama, meaning wealth and enjoyment, so that we will also, along with gaining the wealth and enjoyment, we will also gain what is called as peace. Because if you see, like my Guru Swamiji always says, one part of the world is highly productive, highly prosperous. But by their own admission, they say they have lost the peace of mind. The other part of the world is peaceful, but they are not that productive or prosperous. So how to combine peace and prosperity? That Vedas talk about. So that you can make a living, you can be successful, prosperous and peaceful. And as you gain peace, your intellect becomes more and more sharp. It starts giving you more clarity in life. It starts understanding the relative irrelevance and insignificance of the material world as an end in itself. The choice of material world as an end in itself is a very limited choice. That when we start leading our life dharmically, slowly we begin to understand that it's very, very limited. These are not going to give me that bliss or happiness that I'm looking through these senses, through the sense contacts and the material wealth. What am I actually looking for? I'm actually looking for that happiness only, sukham. So that bliss that I'm looking for, these material wealth cannot give me. They are needed only for transactional purpose. That clarity I get. You understand? That when I get, then I begin to question, then what is the residential address of happiness? Where does happiness reside? Blindly I was thinking that it resides in the material world. So if you want to attend this session, you first need to know where the session is going on. What is the address, isn't it? Without knowing, if you start roaming around, you won't come here, you will be going somewhere else. So this is what we are all doing. Without properly learning, we've started living our life. So what is the residential address of happiness? Then Vedanta very clearly explains that the residential address of happiness is your true self. The happiness is not in the outside objects, it is within you. It is your original nature. That is another meaning of the term dharma. When you say dharma, means nature also. The word dharma has many meanings. Like I said, values, righteousness. Another meaning is nature. What is the essential nature of a being? Right? Dharma of sugar is sweetness. You take away sweetness from sugar, it won't be sugar, isn't it? A thing will not be what it is without it. That is called dharma. So similarly, what is the dharma of human being? And that is the subject matter in the Vedas. That is also the subject matter in the Upanishads. That is the subject matter in the Bhagavad Gita. So if you see, as I said, Bhagavad Gita starts with the word dharma, ends with the word mama. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishnaha, Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhuti, Dhruvo Nitir Matir Mama. So the entire philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is summarized between these two words, dharma and mama. Mama means my, dharma means nature. Mama dharma, what is my essential nature? And the Upanishads declare that your essential nature is infinite, complete, paripurna, limitless, ananda swarupam, meaning bliss. That is your essential nature. But today we are ignorant of our essential nature. And the Shastras, meaning the scriptures, they very clearly say the root of all the problem is this, ignorance. And because of this ignorance of our true nature, we assume a relative personality which is finite, this individuality. And the individual who is limited, this body-mind complex is limited. And the limited sense of individuality will suffer from limitation complex. So therefore, to feel complete, our thoughts run towards the world outside, to the objects and beings of the world, isn't it? So that by getting those objects and beings into our life, we want to feel complete. So we start running, our desire starts running towards the objects, and desires go through various modifications. Desire is called as kama in Sanskrit. And it becomes greed, it becomes anger, it goes through various modifications. When you fulfill a desire, your mind craves for more. Like the Pepsi advertisement says, dil mange more. The mind wants more and more. That is called greed, isn't it? So from kama comes lobha. And when someone comes in between you and your desire, they are interrupting you from achieving the desire, then what do you develop? You develop anger, krodha. So kama, krodha, lobha. And you compare yourself with those who have more than you. You develop jealousy, matsarya. And those who have less than you, you develop arrogance, mada. And when you fulfill a desire, there is fear of whether you will retain it or not. Bhaya. So kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, bhaya, all these various modifications we go through. And this gives us agitations, restlessness. So, the root cause of all suffering is what? Ignorance of our true nature. And that ignorance of our true nature brings about a sense of limitation. It's an imagination, it is not true. And because of that sense of limitation, our thoughts run towards the world outside and we start becoming more restless, agitated, developing more and more disturbances of the mind. This is the suffering. So, very clearly, Upanishads analyze this, Bhagavad Gita also analyzes this. Shri Krishna analyzes this beautifully. We will see that when we get to the second chapter. In the second chapter only, Arjuna actually becomes a disciple. Till then, he is not a disciple, he is just come there on the battlefield to fight the battle. So, in the second chapter, actually verse number 7, chapter 2, he surrenders and becomes a Sishya. And then Shri Krishna gives the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita from chapter 2, verse 11. Technically speaking, the philosophy starts from the 11th verse of chapter 2, when Shri Krishna starts giving the philosophy. In the entire first chapter only Arjuna talks. So, we need to gain the knowledge and then deal with life. Then we will be able to achieve both peace and prosperity. Then we begin to understand that the material world cannot be the end all and be all of life. There is something beyond it. What is that? Where is that happiness? What is the purpose? How to find that? When you start talking about that, that's called yoga or moksha. So, Bhagavad Gita is also called as Yoga Shastra, Moksha Shastra. So, Bhagavad Gita is what? Dharma Shastra. It helps you to gain wealth and combine that with peace and proceed further and reach that ultimate bliss or happiness and get completely liberated, and that's called moksha. So, Bhagavad Gita is both Dharma Shastra and Moksha Shastra. So, it tells us your essential nature is divinity, infinity, complete. And how to achieve that? Again, another word called dharma. There is only one word that is before that word. It's called swadharma. Swadharma means one's own nature. So, when you are functioning in this world as an individual, you have a particular vasanas or gunas, right? Somebody is interested in painting, somebody is interested in dancing, somebody is interested in singing. So, each one of us have a particular set of fragrance or vasanas or impressions. So, what Bhagavad Gita says is, you got to be following your swadharma. How to function in the field of swadharma and all that he explains in detail. I am not going to get into that. Since we are on the term dharma, I am talking about that. So, it talks about dharma, the values. It talks about mama dharma, the essential nature. And to be able to reach that essential nature, we got to be following our swadharma. Right? See, the another biggest weakness in human beings is our nature may be painting or dancing, but somebody else's nature is, let's say, something else, and let's say software engineering, and they are getting a lot of money. Seeing that what we do, we also want to follow that nature, isn't it? By doing that, you won't prosper, you won't blossom. So, there is a reason why you have certain vasanas, certain impressions. So, therefore, Gita says, you follow your swadharma, and how to follow that it explains. And doing that, you will slowly evolve towards merging with your essential nature. When you merge with your essential nature, you have achieved the ultimate purpose of life, and that is the essence of Gita. See, the Mahabharata war between the Pandavas and Kauravas the cousins. Pandavas are relatively good people. They are 5 in number. And Kauravas are 100. They're relatively evil-minded. So, the war between Pandavas and Kauravas symbolically talks about the war, the conflict that is happening within us between the good and evil propensities. All of us have good and evil propensities, right? So, what happens is, when we get into the world, what do we give in most often? Do we give in to what is good for us, or do we give in to what is pleasant? We give in to what is pleasant, not necessarily what is good. Therefore, we need to protect ourselves from learning about dharma. You understand? And then you need to side the good propensities, and when you side the good propensities, then you begin to understand that the truth or the essence is in between good and bad. It is in between both good and bad. In Vedanta, we say you should neither be gaining punya nor pap. Punya means the adrishtapalam. When you do an action, there is drishtapalam and adrishtapalam. Drishtapalam means the result that can be seen. Adrishtapalam means the result that cannot be seen. See, for example, a momentum. Somebody who leads life in a particular way, taking risks, not listening to the intellect, always functioning impulsively, those actions will also be creating a certain momentum within, isn't it? So, when a situation confronts, that person will choose that only. So, this is the adrishtapalam, right? So, when the momentum is in your favor, it's called punya. When the momentum is in your is against you, it is pap. You can look at it like that. Different ways of understanding pap and punya. So, what happens is, we therefore need to neither go towards good nor bad, because it will continue making us lead a life in this world itself and not go deeper and understand our essential nature and liberate. Therefore, Vedanta says, first initially it says, take the side of the good, right? Understanding dharma, take the side of the good, and then come in between, because now the goal is moksha. And when you side the good, slowly you develop momentum. Like I said, you will start beginning to ask questions towards the ultimate. And then you got to come in between, neither good desires nor selfish desires. When you act upon selfish desires, it produces pap or sin. When you act on unselfish desires, it produces punya, the virtues. But we should neither be developing virtue or sin, because essentially what the philosophy says is, everyone is divinity, obscured by these desires, which has come up because of the sense of limitation, which has come up because of ignorance, isn't it? So, therefore, the divinity or God plus desires equals human beings. So, what as human beings we should do is, we should rise above these desires. So, through dharma, we pursue desires and we understand its relative insignificance, and then rise above that and start seeking liberation or moksha or yoga, union with the self. Yoga means, it comes from the root yuj. Yuj means to unite. Uniting with our nature. That is called yoga. So, by being in between, we don't develop desires. We reduce the desires and we don't develop fresh desires, and we slowly move towards the divinity. So, in the first chapter of the Gita, Arjuna requests Shri Krishna, because Shri Krishna, remember, he was the charioteer of Arjuna. So, he requests Shri Krishna to take the chariot and place it in between both the armies. Senayoru bhayor madhye ratam stapayame achyuta. Take the chariot and place it in between both the armies, the good and evil. We got to be in between. That is what the message given in the Gita. And when you are in between, then you qualify to drop the desires and merge with the self. So the fundamental declarations in the Upanishad, declaration in the Upanishad is what? Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. That reality, the what? That infinity, the what? Not this individual that you believe yourself to be. Not this body, mind and intellect complex. Tat Tvam Asi. And this is what is talked about in the Upanishads. Now the Upanishads, the Vedanta, caters to a relatively mature students, right? So therefore, it doesn't go too much into the details of dharma and all that, because that is all covered in the Veda Purva Bhag. So a student who has gone through all that and then come to Upanishads, it starts getting into moksha, discussion about moksha, how to get there, etc. But when you come to Bhagavad Gita, the student here is Arjuna. Arjuna is a man of action like any one of us, right? We are not that matured student. So therefore, what does Bhagavad Gita do? It gives us the Veda, the Dharma also, which prepares us. And then having prepared, then it talks about yoga, the moksha. So that is why, as I said, it is called Dharma Shastra and Yoga Shastra. So first, the Upanishads, what they say with few verses. Upanishad is very terse. They don't go into elaboration, So, because the students are mature, they don't need so much of elaboration. But when you come to Arjuna or any one of us who are in the world, we need a lot more explanation. Therefore, what is given in few mantras in the Upanishads, for example, Isavasya Upanishad is only 18 mantras. The same message is given in the Bhagavad Gita in 18 chapters, which has 701 shlokas, 701 verses. Why this much elaboration? This is needed because the student is needed. And you will see that. See, first of all, remember, knowledge is never given, it is taken. If you try to forcefully give the knowledge, it will not go through. When you sprinkle water on a hot plate, it will just evaporate. So it needs to be absorbed. So only to a person who is qualified it should be given. This is what even Jesus Christ says. Don't cast pearls before swine. When a person is not ready, you don't even sow the seed till the soil is ready, isn't it? First we prepare the soil and then only we sow the seed. Similarly, the student should be prepared. In the first chapter, Shri Krishna never gave any lecture. He never spoke in the first chapter. He just said, when Arjuna said, take the chariot and place it in between both the armies, he just took the chariot and placed it and said, behold, see. That's all he said. Nothing else. Only in the second chapter he starts giving the philosophy after Arjuna says, I am your disciple. That's what we need to understand. So the knowledge is taken, not given. So when a person is taking, he is putting forth series of questions. Right? So accordingly the knowledge is given. And lots of elaboration and some places repetition. Because Arjuna is not understanding and is asking. He asks a certain question in the third chapter and he almost asks the similar question in the fifth chapter. You understand? So, there are a lot of concepts that are reiterated again and again in the Bhagavad Gita. It's elaborated. It's good for us, isn't it? So, Tat Tvam Asi, which is given in few mantras in the Upanishads, is given in 701 shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita. The first 6 chapters talk about Tvam. Tvam means you, the nature of the individual. Who is this individual? Extrinsically, what is the nature of the individual? And intrinsically, essentially, what is the nature of the individual? And what kind of efforts an individual needs to put in to be able to go from extrinsic to intrinsic, right? From this extrinsic living, we need to go to that intrinsic nature. For that, we need to first remove the the disturbances which I talked about: kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, bhaya, isn't it? So therefore, that effort is called right effort, moving from the outer layers towards the core. Moving from the outer layers towards the core. That right effort is called karma yoga. So the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita talks about who are you. See, this is extremely important knowledge. See, when a person is lost in a desert, and let us say he doesn't have GPS or mobile phone or anything, how does he get back to city? He can only get back to city with the help of the sun, isn't it? When the sun rises, he knows this is the direction, this is east. So from that he can know what is west, north, south, all the directions he knows, and then he can get back to his city. Similarly, the first thing that we need to solve is, who am I essentially? Today I am thinking I am this name. For the first few days, I don't have a name. I didn't have a name, isn't it? When I'm born, parents are deciding what name to give. Till then, how they were calling us? Like that they were talking to you, right? All of us were called like that, right? So we didn't have a name. So when I say I am so and so, that is only your name, that's not you. Then you say I am a man or a woman, that is your sex, that's not you. Then you say I am an engineer, doctor, chartered accountant, that is your profession, that is what you do, that is not you. So like this, if you go on, then we ask ourselves, then who the heaven am I? And that is what the first 6 chapters talk about. The first of all, the extrinsic nature, then the essential nature, and the right effort to get to that essential nature, so that the mala means dirt. The malas are, what are the mala? The dirts, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, bhaya, all these have to be taken care of. Achieve chitta shuddhi. You understand? Chitta shuddhi means thought purification. We need to cleanse our thoughts. So, karma yoga. So, first 6 chapters talk about what? Nature of the individual and karma yoga, extrinsic nature, intrinsic nature, and karma yoga. And then the middle 6 chapters talk about tat. Tat means that reality. And that reality also from the extrinsic and intrinsic angle. The extrinsic angle of the reality, Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta says, it is this entire universe. This entire world is nothing but Ishvara. Ishvara means Lord, God. This world is nothing but divinity. But extrinsically, if you see, the 5 elements and all these are there. But when you probe intrinsically, what is that? That is also divinity. right? So this knowledge is given in the middle 6 chapters. So first 6 chapters Jiva Swarupam, middle 6 chapters Ishvara Swarupam, extrinsic and intrinsic. And when we begin to gain this knowledge, the extrinsically the world is of the changing nature, isn't it? The only thing that is certain is uncertainty, constantly changing. But the fact that we are able to be aware of the change, there is another factor which is changeless, right? That changeless entity. So when we begin to gain this knowledge about this change and changeless substratum, then what happens is we develop bhakti, devotion, surrender. Bhakti means self-effacement. As an individual at the extrinsic level, compared to the extrinsic level world, I am a spark and that is a conflagration, right? So then what happens is I start developing what is called as devotion or bhakti or love. Bhakti and love are one and the same. Bhakti, when the emotion is directed towards the higher, it's called bhakti, devotion. And the emotion is directed towards equals or lower beings, it's called love. So therefore, the middle 6 chapters talk about bhakti yoga, bhakti basically. So the first 6 chapters, karma, the effort, action. The middle 6 chapters, bhakti, devotion or right attitude. So right action, right attitude. They both are extremely important, isn't it? Even when you are in a difficult situation, when you develop right attitude, you will be able to face the difficulty easily. And because of the right attitude, you will also get a lot of cooperation from the others. A person with wrong attitude, doesn't get that much cooperation from others. But when you have the right attitude, you get a lot of cooperation. So the first 6 chapters emphasize on action. The middle 6 chapters emphasize on attitude. Then the last 6 chapters talks about asi, meaning what? The connection between the jiva and Ishvara, right? The individual and the total. Now, from the superficial level, if you see, they seem different. The individual is, compared to the world, is just a part, isn't it? But when you go to the essence, there is no difference. This is called Jiva Ishvara Aikya Sambandha. The relationship between the Jiva, the individual, and Ishvara, the total. And this he talks about in the last 6 chapters. And this is called knowledge or awareness. So you can summarize the entire Gita as something that talks about action, attitude, and awareness. 3 A's of life and living, isn't it? Action, attitude, and awareness. And once having known all these things is not enough. Like I said, Karma Yoga will help you to get rid of the agitations, Chitta Shuddhi. And Bhakti will give you Chitta Ekagrata. See, when we talk about Bhakti, that infinite consciousness or divinity is what is manifested as this universe. And that infinite consciousness is formless essentially. But that formless is not something that every one of us can easily relate. Our mind cannot relate with formless. Therefore, what we do is, we take a form. Any form can be taken from the world, right? Whom we call as gods and goddesses. And then we start directing our mind towards the divinity through that form. That is one way of practicing bhakti, right? It is also called as upasana, meditating on a form. Upasana, bhakti, upasana, don't get confused, it all means the same. So through this bhakti and upasana, what do we develop? We develop chitta ekagrata, single pointedness. Right? With the purification and single pointedness of the thoughts, what happens is we become qualified for gaining knowledge. Right? And then that knowledge is given in the last portion, where he talks about Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Vibhaga Yoga, Gunatraya, Vibhaga Yoga, Purushottama Yoga. All these places he talks about the nature at the extrinsic level, and you go deeper at the intrinsic level. It is that permanent aspect. Kshara, Akshara, Uttama Purusha. Kshara means perishable, Akshara means imperishable, Uttama Purusha means that which is beyond the perishable and imperishable. All that he talks about, that essence, when you go to the depth, it's one and the same. Now the interesting thing is, by gaining this knowledge and rooting ourselves in this knowledge, what happens? We get completely transformed. We have a completely different perspective in life. See, when I think that I am this limited individual, right, then I am courting the world for joy, for pleasures, for joy. I'm begging, I'm a slave. Isn't it? But at the end of the Gita, when I understand that I am that divinity in this form, in the beginning, the misunderstanding is what? I am this body, mind, intellect complex having the Atma in the beginning. When that is clarified through the knowledge, then you begin to understand that I am that Atma, or I am the Atma, which is manifesting through this body, mind and intellect and contacting the world. So now what happens? Now my entire perspective is different. I am not contacting the world for joy. I am not contacting the world to take. I am not begging. I am not a slave. I am contacting the world out of joy. Isn't it? I am contacting the world as a master, not as a slave. I am not a beggar, I am a giver. So I start playing, I start acting. I am just acting in this world, expressing my nature joyfully. Life then becomes a celebration. This is the very important perspective change that we need to get. So after gaining the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, you don't have to resign and go away somewhere. In fact, a lot of people think to gain this knowledge, you should be somewhere around 60 or 70 years old. Whereas this knowledge is talking about how to act in this world and how to achieve the goal of life so that you can start living your life as a master. Today you are living your life as a slave. We may have a lot of intelligence in different fields, but deep inside we are contacting the world as a slave only, not as a master. So this is what Bhagavad Gita does to us when we understand this. When he says, the wise people draw this knowledge. In the when I quoted Swami Madhusudana Saraswati's Dhyana Shloka, I said Shri Krishna is milking the Upanishad and giving the Bhagavad Gita. But who enjoys? Only the sattvic mind. Sattvic means calm, composed, serene mind. So it is extremely important to be able to gain the knowledge of the scriptures like Gita and Upanishads, etc. We need to have a very, very calm mind. And that is brought about only if we have certain values and follow certain discipline and lifestyle. And that is what is emphasized in the later part of the Bhagavad Gita in the 16th and 17th chapter. 16th chapter is called as Devasura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga. Sampat means the wealth or the wealth or the characteristics. Deva, Asura. Deva means divine. Asura means demoniac. Good and negative, let us say. Positive and negative. What are the characteristics of the positive people, negative people? And we need to develop these positive traits, values, and follow a certain discipline, lifestyle. Then the mind is ready, prepared to be able to gain the knowledge. So through karma, chitta shuddhi, karma means karma yoga, through bhakti yoga, chitta ekagrata, and through jnanam, become one with the divinity. Right? So this is how Bhagavad Gita slowly leads us. So action, attitude, awareness, the 3 A's of life, very, very important. We then begin to lead our life with awareness, not live our life mechanically thereafter. Isn't it? And not lead our life as a slave. The bondage will be completely thrown away. We'll be living our life as a liberated person. So the 18th chapter is called as Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Moksha means liberation. Right? So this is what the entire Bhagavad Gita talks about. It gives us direction in life. First of all, emphasizing on dharma. Then slowly leading us towards moksha. So this goal is not something that we need to attain. According to Vedanta, you are already infinite. You are infinite. But due to ignorance, you do not know that you are infinite. That is why you are living such a slavish life. So this ignorance can only be removed through what? Only through knowledge. So your actions cannot bring you liberation. Your actions cannot give you that goal. Only knowledge can give you the goal. But to gain that knowledge, you need to get chitta shuddhi and chitta ekagrata. So for that, action and bhakti helps. You understand? So through action and bhakti, we come to jnana. Through jnana of our real self, and we get into meditation, dhyan, and through dhyan, we merge with the self within. This is how we have to proceed, and this is what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. And now, Bhagavad Gita, as I said, is a conversation between Shri Krishna and Arjuna. In that, they don't say, now first chapter we are discussing, second chapter, they are discussing this on the battlefield. So they cannot, first chapter, second chapter, like that, they cannot say. So sage Vyasa, because of whom we got this, he is the one who nicely put it in this way. So he has put it in 18 chapters, right? And it has a beautiful thought sequence, the sequence of thought. And people like my guru, Swami Parthasarathy, he has done research and he further divided every chapter into various topics. So when we go through that, then we begin to understand the logical thought flow. And when we go through that systematically, we get the complete picture. When we get the complete picture, the clarity is very, very important. That intellect, And in fact, there is a symbolism behind the chariot on which Arjuna and Shri Krishna is seated. Arjuna represents the individual, you and me. The chariot represents his body, the physical body. The horses represent the senses, the 5 senses that we have. And then the mind represents the reins. Shri Krishna, the charioteer, represents the intellect. The charioteer should be controlling the horses through the reins. Then the horses will be traveling on the path properly so that the individual can be seated on the chariot nicely and enjoy life, enjoy the travel. Similarly, in our life, the intellect should be controlling the mind and the senses. Then we will be happily sitting in this body and enjoying the life's journey. Otherwise, we will suffer, and that is what is happening. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita gives us direction and clarity about life. After having understood that, we got to live our life. So a lot of people think, why am I living life? Why do I have to study Gita now? Understand? You have to study first, learn, and then live. Not live and then learn. So it is not a post-retirement course. It's a course that you got to learn first and then live your life. So that is why in our scriptures, they split our life into 4 parts, 4 stages, called as Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. Brahmacharya means student life. When you are a student, you learn the dharma, learn the philosophy, and then as a Grahastha, you start living that, and then you mature into Vanaprastha. Grahastha is the family life, and then you move from there to Vanaprastha, recluse, little bit withdrawn, handing over the responsibilities to your children, and then focusing on the higher. And then comes last stage, which is sannyas, which is the stage where you are into deeper reflection and research. So you have completely given away everything. Given away means risen above everything. You are fully focusing on the divinity and getting ready to merge with that. That is that last stage, sannyas. So when do we have to study this? When we are in the student life, not when we are almost 60, 70. And a lot of people are scared. Bhagavad Gita will probably, if you study, it will make you leave action. In fact, Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield and go. But Shri Krishna told him, you cannot do that. You got to act. So Gita will make you dynamic, act in this world, achieve success, peace, prosperity, and move towards liberation. So with that, we can conclude today's session. As I said, next week we will begin with the Dhyana Shlokas, the invocation to the Bhagavad Gita, and then we continue. Let's conclude now. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Kayena Vacha Manasendriyairva Buddhyatmana va Prakriti Swabhavat Karomi Yadhyad Sakalam Parasmai Narayanayeti Samarpayami. Hari Om.